Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. As you can see, I am joined by the ever so handsome and articulate and amazing Christian polemicist, apologist, and YouTube evangelist, the Dizzle. So thank you so much, David, for coming to join us. Just before we get going, guys, could you just confirm with a quick 1 to tell us that the sound levels are all good, that you can hear us? David, if you just want to give us a talk. And
I'll give a little check 1. You got to say check 1. So
okay.
We're even.
Check
someone need to be turned up, ladies and gentlemen.
Is everybody
check
good?
1. Check 1. Check 1.
2. Check 2. Right, we've got 1s. That's great. That means that we are good for sound. So, David, as I told you off screen, it's just a tradition on my channel that the guest reads a psalm as a prayer, and you have agreed not to read the longest psalm in the book of Psalms, which for whatever reason I thought maybe you might do for a practical joke. So, yes, over to you.
Yeah, well, I'm a big fan of some of the shorter psalms, so you could be happy about that one. I like Psalm 1, 2, 3, obviously 22, 23, stuff like that. But we'll stick with Psalm 1 here. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. He will be like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does, he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like chaff which the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish.
This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So, David, thank you. I recognize. What time is it out there in the US?
2 o'clock on the East Coast. We're so big over here. We have a bunch of different time zones out here, not like a little island place, you know.
Yeah, right. David did tell me that he only just woke up, so I think he's doing this on the morning coffee and energy drink. So I thought we'd just sort of start by maybe going into a little bit more detail about this big announcement that you've made. You know, that you're deleting your channel, and yeah, what was it? I mean, you've already explained why you're going to do that. Does this mean that you're disappearing off YouTube completely, or are we never going to see you again on YouTube?
You'll see me. It'll just be different. So the idea here, and when I said I'm deleting my channel, everyone, I don't know why, because I never said you'll never see me on YouTube again. I said I'm deleting this channel. My current channel is massively dysfunctional for long-term impact on YouTube. And basically the situation right now is kind of the people who have been into it for a long time, the YouTubers, people who are called YouTubers. You sort of live on YouTube. You wake up and you're thinking about YouTube. You wake up and it's you're constantly either working on material for a video, or recording a video, or editing a video, or talking and chatting in the comments and so on. You basically, live a good part of your life on YouTube. And what that does, I found, is it just gives YouTube a massive amount of control over what you do, that they can take. Like I was taking down people don't realize how much they come after me. Because I don't want to come across like I'm just whining all the time.
Oh, give
But
us an idea.
they're constantly coming after me. Basically 1 to 3 takedowns per month. I don't mean taking down material. I mean like strike, banned for a week. So between 1 and 3 of those per month, where I'm like being. And I always win the appeals for like the last year and a half. I don't win the appeals. I get rejected for most of the appeals, but then we argue with them behind the scenes or on Twitter or something like that. And they eventually admit that they're wrong. But anyway, there are bots that seem to be, getting my stuff taken down. Some have suggested there may be some people there at YouTube who aren't crazy about me and so on, who are taking my stuff down. But it's basically the problem that I've recognized is the idea that all of my content is in one spot in an environment where there are people who constantly want to be taking it down. So even though I keep getting it restored, I'm still embedded in this system where all of my stuff is constantly, I'm constantly ground to a halt. It's like you wake up and, oh, there's been a terrorist attack. I definitely want to make a video about this. And, oh, whoa, no, I can't. I'm banned for a week. And it's just, why am I so embedded in this system that they can just shut me down overnight for no reason? And then, like a week later, I can start up again because, they fixed their mistake. So what I think is necessary, if they're coming after your content. If they're not coming after your content, then you don't technically have anything to worry about right now. But I suspect they will be coming after your content.
See, the thing is, with you gone, you're the big distraction that allows a whole bunch of smaller channels to get away with things. It's kind of like. So what's the what's the sort of plan then? What's this next move?
This is why I'm saying it's not that I'm disappearing from YouTube. It's that I think ultimately where you spend your time, like I was saying, that the bulk of my time is spent having something to do with YouTube. That the bulk of your time needs to be on your own stuff, your own app, your own website, your own platform. That's where you're most active. And then you still post that stuff on YouTube, but it's ultimately directing back to your own stuff. And I think this will make it much more difficult to ban someone, because if you have your main hub and you control that, no one can take you. They're not taking you down from that, but you're putting that material out to YouTube and other platforms. Then them banning one of your little outlets does nothing to stop, your entire process, your entire system for putting out content. So
is this a platform, sorry, that you're building, or is this a platform that you've identified as like a free speech platform that you can use?
That it's basically everything I'm going to be posting on is either controlled by me or someone I personally know.
Nice.
As far as the people who are running the system. And so, so I'll be in a couple different spots, but it'll ultimately be, there's no mystery people involved. You know what I mean? If something were to go wrong, it would be, yo, dude, what are you doing? Hey, you just took down my stuff. What the heck is that? Right. So
and give me back my book.
So again, most of it'll be stuff that I own, or all of it will either be something that I own or that someone I know owns. So.
Oh, that's going to be good.
Not getting taken down.
And then is the idea that other people will upload these videos that you make in this hub, that people like me would upload your videos onto my channel?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always been my policy that anyone can take my videos that I make and do whatever they want with them, and that'll still be the policy and so on. But I will have my own channels in different places where I take stuff from my platform. And probably to encourage people to come to the stuff that is not controlled by YouTube. I'll probably release a day early, put it on my own stuff a day, one day, and then the next day is released on YouTube or something like that. But and other people can be releasing stuff.
Really wonderful. It sounds very exciting. It sounds like an evolution in your life and work, as it
Yeah,
were.
and it's a situation where not a lot of people, especially if people have, you know, once you start getting a lot of subscribers and a lot of views on YouTube, a lot of people don't want to try and shift, right? It's like, I don't want to rock this boat when I have, you know, all these, you know, I'm getting all these views. And even if I have to put up with some nonsense from, you know, the trust and safety team and so on, it's better to put up with that than rock the boat. But I don't know. I'm not scared of that kind of stuff. So I'm sort of a, hey, let's burn this to the ground and try something new and see if it works. And if it doesn't, no problem. I'll figure out something that will.
Thanks be to God. I like the courageous attitude. Is this platform that you're setting up? I guess it's something that people can log into. They can see it for themselves.
I'm basically it's a few different things, because even you've got to replace a lot. You need like a communication system, you need a hosting platform, website, and stuff like that. But I'll be posting once stuff is up and running. I'll be sharing where everyone could go. And yeah, so that stuff will be up and running before I delete my channel. So I will tell people before I delete my channel, here's where you can find everything.
Great. And are all your old videos going up there on the hub? So is it a case that all your content from the last how many years are going to go on this hub?
Not necessarily every single video, because some of them are like old live streams on some time sensitive topic that doesn't matter anymore, you know. And some of my old videos are just announcements like, hey, I'm out here in such and such Texas, if you want to come out to the church and stuff like that, that's no longer relevant. But yeah, the bulk of my content will all be nice and safe and sound. And by the way, I think there are YouTube channels that have re-uploaded all my stuff. So already.
Oh yeah. So, yeah. I think that it's going to be a really important thing for everybody to do is find your favorite video by Act 17 Apologetics and grab it, clip it, and stick it on your channels, because YouTube can't get us all, you know. What in terms of like what does it, because you've mentioned in the past that you want to build like an apologetics empire.
Yeah,
you've mentioned this in videos. Like, was that kind of hubris? Was that an ambition that you're actually pursuing, or was it sort of pipe dream talk? You know, what is this discourse that we're having about an apologetics empire?
I believe that we're the only ones that could pull it off. I believe that Christians are the only ones that could pull off sort of. Obviously, not everyone's going to agree on a lot of things and so on. But, you know, in Islam, I mean, they very quickly start accusing each other of being kafirs or hypocrites or heretics and so on over slight differences. And atheists, you know, they would agree on the big picture. There's no God, or there are no gods, or something like that. But they're quick to really go after each other's throats. Whereas, you know, Christian apologetics and so on, you generally find whatever people's backgrounds are. It's like, hey, can we all agree Jesus is Lord here? Jesus rose from the dead, and we need to get that across. And, you know, you've got Islam over here and atheism over here and cults. And can we just can we focus on presenting the message of Christ and getting that across and so on? And I think we are actually the ones that could actually do that. And so, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to, but what does that look like in terms of a practical outworking? Is that something that you've started to form already? You've started to structure it?
Well, I mean, we've had meetings where a bunch of, it's mainly Christian, like YouTubers and so on, would get together, have discussions and so on, and network. But I mean, one of the things I announced, and this was probably 2 years ago when I announced it, but as like a first project of something this might look like, I said that I was going to put together a series of 50 videos covering all the main issues dealing with apologetics, dealing with Islam, and defending against Muslim objections. And I said I'd put out a series of 50 videos, 4 to 6 minutes, so pretty short, 4 to 6 minute videos, one topic per video, and would release one each week. And that during the week, people from other countries would for the first few days, translate the video, and for the rest of the time that week, re-record it in their own language. So not just adding subtitles to something I made, but actually re-record the video in your language, and just do that once per week. And so at the beginning of the week, I would here's a transcript of the entire video, so you can just translate off the transcript. And then once you've got that, re-record it in your own language and then post it. And then at the end of 1 year, we've all got a complete apologetic series dealing with Islam in multiple languages. And when I said I wanted to do that, I heard from people in at least dozens of languages, dozens of people from different countries speaking different languages, all said they'd be willing to translate and re-record in their own language. But the idea is if we actually manage to do that, if we actually manage to hold together to where one apologetic series over the course of a year ends up being an apologetic series in, let's say, 30 different languages, well, you sort of built up the framework for getting information to the entire world in multiple languages right there. Because right after that, you could do sort of a basic theology, 10 video basics of Christian theology series, translate that to make sure that, as people are leaving Islam and becoming Christians, they're not jumping into cults or something like that, that snatch them up. And then after that, you could do the same thing and make, defending the existence of God or something like that, or other things. So that's sort of what I'm thinking of, this idea where people are working wherever they are, but there's also, kind of a network for doing bigger things. So
it sounds like a great idea. I know that America is kind of leading the English speaking world in terms of apologetics. There's not much, sadly, there's not much apologetics coming out of the UK. And obviously I can't speak for any other languages, except Spanish, but in the Latin world, you tend not to find the apologetics in the way that we're talking about it. So are you finding that there's very many American YouTube apologists who are wanting to get involved in this? Are there any big names that you can reveal that are going to be getting involved in sort of this curriculum that you want to start constructing?
Well, it's pretty cool because all of the, not talking about what I was just mentioning there, but all of the bigger Christian YouTube channels are kind of on the same page and willing to work together to get things done. Like Mike Winger, John McRae from What Do You Meme, Cameron Bertuzzi, Inspiring Philosophy. So all of the bigger Christian channels, we all get along pretty well and are willing to work together. And so and we all, what I'd like to see from the bigger Christian YouTubers is like sort of mentoring the next generation, because I had to learn this stuff, right? I did not know, I could barely turn on a computer when I started YouTube, let alone edit videos and so on. But the next generation, they're sort of born into it and raised in it. So I believe that the next generation can do it way better than we ever could. And so I
can barely edit a video. I'm still at the point of I've just managed to learn to click go live and end broadcast, and that's probably about the full limits of my technological ability.
I know that feeling. But yeah, it's a situation where just so imagine if we're all on the same page and we all work together, then we can have like an internship process where, hey, here are some young guys starting out and they're just getting started and they're working Christian apologetics, and there's no need for them to reinvent the wheel. Let's teach them what they need to know, and then let them go from there. And hopefully I hope they blow us all out of the water. I look forward to the day when I can just look back and say I am irrelevant. I would love to be able.
And speaking of irrelevant, the Dizzle has a special advertisement that he needs to do. So I'm just going to step out of the room for a moment, and he's going to do a quick advert.
Are you interested in Christian apologetics and polemics against Islam? If so, you need to follow Bob the Builder's channel on YouTube. This is a man who spends his weeks dealing with people at Speaker's Corner. So everything he's going to say to you is battle tested on the front lines. So check out Bob from Speaker's Corner, and you'll know what's effective when you're actually dealing with people in a crowd, a very hostile one, coming at you with everything they can. You'll know it's battle tested. So check him out.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful message. I fully appreciate it. Check is in the post. I like in terms of
he just said beforehand, he's like, hey, if I just cut, can you make a commercial?
Yeah. That's funny. Basically. In terms of the like the nature of our apologetics and our discourse with Islam. Like I think you and me and probably most of us that are doing these kind of YouTube posts and videos and debates, we recognize that we're winning the intellectual argument. You know, Muslims are surrendering ground. Like they're giving up arguments that they used to use. Like they've given up Songs of Solomon as an argument. They've given up John 16 as an argument, as a prophecy for Muhammad. They've given up the idea of saying that someone else was crucified on the cross. They've accepted that it was Jesus that was crucified on the cross, and he only swooned. They've accepted that there are variant Qurans and things like this. How do you think, as Christians who want to do evangelism on YouTube, where do you feel that we need to go next with the argument? Or do you feel it's a case of continuing to go over the same ground or laying down? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, kind of both. I mean, you need to go in new directions, but you also need to keep dealing with the old objections just because they were so massively influential. So, I mean, we've destroyed the claim that the Quran's been perfectly preserved, for instance, but you'll still see so many Muslims who aren't familiar with the discussion still believing something that they heard in like a Zakir Night clip when they were growing up, and still believing that it's been perfectly preserved and so on. So and something I've noticed is that as people expand onto other platforms, they'll start using the same old arguments because there aren't people over there to refute them. So Inspiring Philosophy has been dealing with arguments from Muslims over on TikTok, but it's the same old stuff like you were mentioning, like Song of Solomon and stuff. They're just, hey, let's go over on this platform where there aren't Christian apologists who are responding to this stuff, and we can get our points out to a new audience who doesn't know anything about these issues. So they're still using Deuteronomy 18:18 and Song of Solomon and John 14:16 and so on. They're using all these arguments that have been just massively refuted. So one, we have to keep pushing on those. It's just the general gist is you just have to be relentless, because they're going to be relentless. They're going to be relentless in putting out bad arguments. And so if you are not relentless in refuting the bad arguments, then people will.
And I think it's a point that we mentioned the last time that we spoke. It's kind of like, the Dai and the Dawagandists, they've got this script. So, you've got Fibin Farouk. He's come over here to the UK and he's going around the UK doing this tour. He hasn't turned up at the corner yet. I think that's because he's running scared from Shamsi Gonzalez. But like you've got this script that is just so ingrained in the Muslim community in terms of the Islamic world and yet there are so many Christians that aren't anywhere near as equipped to deal even with the bad arguments. And I think that social media is, a particularly useful tool to try and re-educate the church. But I think what's emerging is that there's almost like YouTube apologists, and I was wondering what you thought about this, where YouTube apologist celebrity and being a proper authority within the church all intersect. Because you're a YouTube celebrity, you've got tens of thousands of fans, hundreds of thousands of subscribers, your videos are watched by tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and people listen to you, including myself. We respect what you've got to say. I particularly enjoy when you start talking about the importance of free speech, but that's kind of like a political issue, isn't it? And what do you think is the relation between us as YouTube apologists and our relation to sort of the wider body of Christ, and particularly those in authority in the local congregation, the local fellowship?
Yeah, well, there's nothing terribly different about the world of social media and YouTube, except for the sense that it made what you would do in the past much easier. So like in the time of Jesus, you wanted to talk to a crowd, they had to be in hearing distance, or you needed this kind of relay system where someone says it and then someone further down the hill repeats it and so on. So you can talk to a big crowd. And then eventually, we get the printing press, and so literacy is able to increase. And then eventually you get the radio, and then of course television and so on. And now we're just in a situation where, my goodness, I could, there are people around the world watching this right now, and I can make a video, and people in Saudi Arabia will be watching it right after I post it. And it's just 14 centuries of Christians who wanted to share information, wanted to preach the gospel, wanted to refute false claims and so on. They had the same goal. They just couldn't have dreamed about doing it as quickly as we can. So we have the same goals that people have had and the church has had and so on. We just have access to a lot of different people much more quickly than anyone could ever have dreamed of and so on. So it's kind of like we get to be the megaphone, right? Like we get to be a kind of global megaphone. But with that comes a lot of responsibility, because anyone right now can jump on YouTube and become popular. Whereas, before, this is true both in like Christianity and Islam and everywhere else. If someone is going to be like be publicly representing Christianity in the past, you would go through some channels. You would, go to school and become a popular preacher or something like that. And then people really like you, so you end up traveling around a ton. Whereas now you could just jump online. There's no sort of oversight, right?
Yeah.
And so you got to be careful, because someone could come along and just be very likable and not really know what he's talking about. And then you could see the impact in Islam, because 20 years ago, the spokesmen, the people who represented them in the West, were very, very carefully chosen. You'd have your Jamal Badawi showing up in a suit and tie, and Shabir Ali's and so on. All of these, people who are handpicked for being a good fit for convincing Westerners that Islam isn't this thuggish mentality that we've been told it was. But now you look at people who can jump on YouTube and become popular. Now you get the me strong than you types. And it's that's
destroy
actually
your boy.
You boy in your face, which they become extremely popular because of that. But now the Ummah is sort of losing its ability to oversee these guys and control them. And Muslim organizations no longer have the ability to hand pick whom they're putting out, because the masses are speaking for you, and so anyone can become popular.
There's kind of a democratic process that occurs, though, isn't there? Which is that someone who is just genuinely awful. Like who's that guy you've debated? He always wants to debate the embryology, and he pretends he comes from an organization, but then it's just him. It's just him. He's the one emailing you at the start, and he's the one debating you at the finish. And he ends up complaining that you're not dealing with any of his arguments.
It sounds like Nadir Ahmed.
Yeah, like Nadir Ahmed. There is a sort of democratic process that occurs when someone is so bad, or you would think that they're so bad, that lots of people would just recognize it, and that the rest of the community of YouTube apologists for both camps would just sort of shun them, and not give them much space, because they're doing harm, as it were, to the side. I can't think of a Christian version of Nadir. He's kind of unique. Bless his socks.
I mean, the thing is, they don't realize how much long-term damage they're doing to themselves by the people they're picking, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know how long you've been doing it. I've seen you for a while on YouTube. When did you start?
So I mean, I've always been evangelizing Muslims since I was 13 years old, but I only started doing it on YouTube about 6 years ago.
Okay.
And that was through Soco Films, which is not this channel that everyone who loves David Wood should subscribe to. It's this one, Bob Speaker's Corner. Go on.
So if you go back to 2000, I forget which year I first debated in, probably 2006 or something like that. But 2000, you go to 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, so on. The stuff that we were trying to prove back then. Hey, Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl. Islam has a death penalty for apostasy. These kinds of things. Almost every Muslim that we would debate, no, that's a lie. You're lying about Islam. Yeah. There is no such thing in Islam. And so it's just, people don't realize how amazing it is right now that these guys are all defending this kinds of thing, right? They're defending it now. They're openly, publicly proclaiming how proud they are that they're going to execute apostates and so on. They're defending Muhammad's relationship,
defending marriage to children.
Yeah. And so it's been a massive shift in a very short amount of time. And by the way, this was the plan. This was the plan back then. So back then, we're sitting there looking around and recognizing, wait a minute, the people who are sent to represent Islam in the West are very carefully hand-picked and handcrafted to say what is going to be most comforting to Western listeners, to make Islam sound like something they would really, really like. And so they deny all this stuff about, killing apostates and sex with children and so on. So what we started doing back then was, let's start putting the issues out there. And the popular speakers, so the Zakir Naiks and the Shabir Alis and the Jamal Badawis, they're not going to want to touch this stuff about, tons of critical issues related to Muhammad. They're not going to want to touch this stuff. But what you'll end up with is some younger, more aggressive Muslims who are saying, hey, wait, I can defend that. Wait a minute, our leaders are not defending that. Zakir Naik's not defending against this. Well, I can defend against this. And so the goal back then was just get them talking about it, right? Get them, please, by all means, give your defense of marrying a child. Give your defense. In fact, even completely refute what we're saying. Say, yeah, Muhammad had sex with a 9-year-old girl, but there's these great reasons why he needed to do it. He needed to cement his friendship with Abu Bakr, right?
Oh, it's because she was mature. She was a mature woman. They mature in hotter countries quicker than in other climates. Did you not know that, David?
Things like that, right?
Yeah.
You want them, hey, so in other words, instead of people denying it and saying this doesn't exist in Islam, you want people saying, yes, of course this is true, but here's why. Because then all of a sudden that information gets out to the public. Because back then you walked up to a Muslim, I was shocked because people in general really thought that Muslims were much more knowledgeable about their religion than people from other backgrounds, just because, they were dressed in a certain way. You'd see them heading to the mosque and so on. They seemed very knowledgeable, but, once you start asking them questions, you find out, you know your basic practices, and your basic practices are ingrained in you. But as soon as I start bringing up issues from the Quran or the Hadith, you have no clue what I'm talking about. And so the challenge became, well, how do you get these issues out to the Muslim community? How do you get these issues to become common knowledge so that a speaker can't come in and deny them? A speaker can't come in and say, hey, Muhammad didn't have sex with a 9-year-old girl.
And we've seen very much the fruit of that at Speaker's Corner. Like, we go down there now and we do exactly the same that you do. And we're often shocked when I had it last Sunday. I was debating about whether Saudi Arabia should reorganize along Christian lines or not with a student from Medina University. And one of the classic things that I see, and I don't know if you've noticed this, is that you'll say Muhammad did X, like we got him on, like Muhammad called for the ethnic and religious cleansing of the Arabian Peninsula, which is in Sahih Muslim. Mm-hmm. His initial instinct was to deny it and say, where's your proof? Where's your proof? Like, prove it, as if somehow he thought that maybe I was lying. So then when I quote the hadith, then within 20 immediately starts defending it. And it's like, well, if you defend, and he's giving an apologetic for it as well. So he obviously was aware of it. So the demanding proof, but then when you provide the proof, they immediately switch to defending, which means that they were aware that you were telling the truth the whole time. And it's kind of like within Dawaganda, just being manipulative and deceitful is kind of common culture to them. Like to imply by demanding proof that they didn't know that it already existed. Like the more honest thing to be would be, yeah, I know about that story, but then let me go and tell you why it was okay for Muhammad to ethnically cleanse all the Jews and Christians from the Arabian Peninsula. But what I find is that I wonder whether, like, in terms of awakening wider society, like an awakening whole sections of the church that are probably too scared, like how do you feel that there's much of a change in the consciousness of the church to the sort of threat that Islam poses to us existentially, or do you feel that many in the church, they hear this, they hear what you're saying, they hear what the Muslims are saying, and then they just go, well, it's 6 of one and half a dozen of the other?
I do think there's been a shift over, and a lot of it has to do with just jihad being relentless and people being a little more aware of what's been going on in the world. But I'm just saying, I've seen a pretty big shift in the past 15 years because even back then, where churches started catching on, after 9/11 and so on, when people started becoming aware that there are a lot of people who want to kill them if given the opportunity. So there was some interest back then, but still, when I would blast away at Muhammad, and when I would make fun of Muhammad for something, let's say being covered in semen or something like that, the passages about him having semen on his clothes and Aisha needing to constantly scrape or wash it off before he was heading to prayers. When I would say stuff like that and be bringing that up and be making fun of Muhammad in, let's say, 2010, 2011, I would get a ton of messages from Christians telling me, David, this is wrong. You shouldn't be going after Muhammad. That's so hurtful towards people. And, you're just going to drive them away. They're going to hate Christians forever. They're never going to listen and so on. And then, after a decade of doing that, and then you start seeing people leaving Islam when Christians now are like going after the foundations of their beliefs in the Quran and in Muhammad, using a ton of different approaches. Some of them are very, very extreme in the way they're presenting information. Some of them are laid back and, calm and careful and so on. But you see, it leads to what they call an avalanche of apostasy. That's their words, not ours. And so now, it's pretty rare for me to get complaints from Christians. So it seems to be much more acceptable now than it was like a decade ago to be blasting away at Islam. So I don't know. It seems like it's built into Christians more now that, yes, it is okay to deal with Muhammad and the Quran. And yes, it is okay to be pretty aggressive in the way that you're doing that. Because keep in mind, when I was starting to, to really blast away at Muslim arguments about Muhammad and the Quran and so on, it was, wait, you got two things here. One, you can not deal with this issue, or you can deal with this issue. One or the other. If you're not dealing with this issue, you got some problems, because just birth rates and so on in the Muslim world, you're going to start dealing with you're going to leave a much, much bigger problem for your children and grandchildren than the one you have to deal with. So it's either deal with it or not deal with it. And two, if you decide to deal with it, then are you able to do that peacefully or not? And so I look at it as, okay, blasting away at the foundations of the ideology through YouTube videos is the most peaceful way I can deal with a problem that is threatening to violently subjugate me. And so what in the world would you be complaining about? That I said, okay, we have to actually do something, but I'm responding peacefully through, critical analysis of the foundations of your religion. Seriously, what would you object to as a Christian? Hey, you're dealing with the problem, but you're dealing with it in a peaceful manner. Why would you be upset about that?
Well, I think, yeah, I totally agree. I think that within the church, there is obviously this struggle against this kind of, I mean, you'll have to forgive me. I'm struggling to suppress a cough. Probably
just go ahead and cough.
Yeah, I'm just, yeah. But like, there's you've got within the church this kind of, let's call it a wimpiness, a liberal sort of civic religion that dominates a lot of congregations and a lot of churches, and they completely absorb the political agenda of the progressives in society. So, like the Democrats in America and Labour in the UK, and maybe a whole section of the Republicans. I'm not quite sure, but it's almost like it deafens people to what Islam actually stands for. And they just reply in response to all the evidence that you present, and of which you've catalogued countless evidence over your years on YouTube. But they just turn around and they gain one blanket statement: all religions are the same. And like, what would you say to Christians like myself who, believe in the cause that we're fighting, who are maybe getting involved in that cause? How do we cut through the crap to try and waken up our brothers and sisters who are still asleep about the fact that, Christians are being persecuted in Nigeria? Islam stands for the dimitude of Christians, if ever it dominates, the murder of apostates, the killing of homosexuals, the reestablishment of the slave trade. Like, how do we awaken Christians who, quite happy fighting poverty, but not quite happy fighting a religion that wants to bring back slavery?
Yeah, I think we've been doing that, because when people change their mind and come to view Islam as a problem that needs to be addressed, and then, how to go about that. When people change their minds on that issue, it's normally like in our favor, right? Like it's usually not someone who says, oh man, Islam is actually kind of a big problem in the world and we need to do something about it. And then you learn some new fact and then decide, no, actually it's wonderful and all religions are the same. It's usually the reverse. It's usually people believing a bunch of nonsense they've heard about Islam being great and wonderful, or lots of times because people like me, like I had a Muslim friend in college, and you think, oh, okay, well, he's a nice guy, he's not trying to kill anyone.
Yeah.
So it's sort of like that, and then over time it becomes undeniable. Like, okay, maybe after 100 terrorist attacks, I could still say, but there was Anders Breivik, and he was a white supremacist Nazi terrorist, and so other ideologies have their terrorists and so on. But then when it's just they're so relentless with the jihad that you can keep pointing out, like Glenn over at the religionofpeace.com, when he does his Ramadan bombathon, and he just compares, here's the number of terrorist attacks carried out in the name of Islam over in this 1 month of Ramadan. Here are the terrorist attacks carried out in the name of all other religions combined. And Islam always, always, always completely dwarfs all other religions combined. That stuff just has an impact on people over the years and so on. And so, I mean, it's really, again, it's an awesome time, because if you go back 15 years, it was rare to hear from ex-Muslims. And now ex-Muslims there are ex-Muslims just everywhere. And so it's much cooler now, because they're often very effective at pointing out problems in Islam that they can look. I was actually part of that, and yep, you got some problems with this ideology. And so I think it's basically what we're doing. It's that things have been shifting. Things have been shifting for the last day. Now we can always be more effective in accelerating that. But I think we're on the right track as far as continuing to hammer away on certain issues and make them common knowledge. And it's hard to argue with results. When you see people leaving Islam, when you see people becoming Christians, it's hard to say, stop what you're doing, guys. It's so bad. It's like,
Yeah.
well, what are you doing? All you do is complain. What do you have? Do you have a better option? Do you know how to deal with Islam better? Because I'd love to see it, but until then,
I think most of those people who put in that complaint, they don't want to deal with Islam at all. I think that many Christian leaders are just sticking their head in the sand, and because they don't want to recognize that there is a challenge to the church that we have to rise to, and I think that rising to that challenge, certainly apologetics and polemics plays a significant part. It plays an important role. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing, and I wouldn't, be interested in what you're doing, but I am. But I think there's like a social, a political, an economic, and a cultural aspect to this struggle that as Christians, we haven't even begun to think about or to talk about. When you really want to crack this nut, and God willing, we do. But like, you're going to have to deal with politics, economics, culture to do that. And it's not just winning debates or making clever arguments. What are your thoughts?
Oh yeah, it's really part of it is part of a bigger picture, and that people are being influenced throughout their lives to behave in certain ways, and in the UK and in the US, especially, people are being conditioned not to avoid, let's say, avoid being called names at all costs.
Yeah.
Whatever else happens in life, you do not want to be called certain names. You don't want to be called racist. You don't want to be called bigot, and so on. And that works together with people who are able to weaponize any criticism of their ideology. They say, aha, you criticize my ideology. Now you're my ideology a phobe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And oh no, I don't want to be a such and such a phobe. I don't want to be I don't want to be a bigot against anyone. And so people are terrified of it. And it's to such an extreme that, I mean, you've seen it in the UK with the grooming gangs and so on. I mean, thousands and thousands of people can spend decades
ignoring a problem.
I'm talking about the ones perpetrating it.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Can drugging, raping, gang raping, pimping little girls for decades. And people are so terrified of being called Islamophobes or something that they'll do nothing about it. And so what the reason that's such a concern is, you look at, organizations like CARE here in America, the Council on American Islamic Relations. They do the exact same thing that led to that in the UK, namely any criticism of Islam.
I apologize to interrupt, Dave. I've got a couple of people saying that you're muted at the moment.
I'm muted?
Yeah, I've just seen a couple of comments say that in the comments section. Guys, could you put a 1 to say that you can hear David?
Check. That's it. People are saying he's fine.
Yeah. Oh, that's not come through on my side, but I've got a couple of comments. Right. I got a couple of comments from people. It must be your reception, guys. So I'm sorry to cut you at mid-flow there, David.
Oh, you're good. What was I talking about?
You were talking about the fact that people are scared to be called names because.
Oh yeah. So you look at what organizations like CARE are doing, and I understand the idea of saying, hey, we have to protect people and so on, but you look at what they're actually doing. Any criticism of anything having to do with Islam or anything any Muslims do, CARE is all over it, blasting away at people for being racist and Islamophobes and bigots and so on. So it's like you guys are trying to produce the same sort of society that we saw what that led to in the UK, where we will all gladly turn a blind eye towards whatever's going on just because we're worried about being called names. And so that basically affects everyone being raised in that environment where people can control you through name calling. They can stop you from what you want to do through name calling. I mean, you don't have to go out and fight. You just have to start calling names. And so people have weaponized that very effectively in silencing people and getting people to keep their mouths shut about things like Islam and jihad and so on. The plus side is, I mean, think about this, because I said a few minutes ago, that when people change their minds on these issues, it's usually in our favor. It's usually people realizing, okay, Islam is a problem, and yes, it is okay to address it with information that may hurt people's feelings and so on. But notice, I mean, politicians all over the place are telling you, hey, if you have a problem with Islam, it's because you're a racist, Islamophobic, hate-mongering bigot. And the entire education system is telling people that. All of the entertainment industry is telling people that. Journalists across the board are telling people that. If every power source of information, of mass information control, if all of them are bombarding people with this idea that, hey, you're a racist and an Islamophobe and a bigot if you're criticizing Islam, and people are still coming around, just imagine if you ever break that, right? Like if you ever reach a tilting point to where it becomes acceptable on a regular television show to point out, guys, the Quran has not been perfectly preserved. That's insane and idiotic to make that claim when the evidence shows otherwise. Or no, this is what Islam does have the death penalty for apostasy. If it just became acceptable to say, hey, Muhammad did have sex with a 9-year-old girl, and it became acceptable for politicians to be addressing that, and journalists to be addressing that, and the education system to be addressing that, just imagine how much the world would shift if people are actually coming around to seeing reality when everyone is telling them not to. I mean, imagine if this just became okay to say for politicians, and all of a sudden I think it would just accelerate what's already happening. It's happening pretty rapidly right now, but my goodness, you could have a just massive shift overnight if it became
and I think there's very much a reason why none of the mainstream media are covering the genocide that's going off in Nigeria right now. And that's because it doesn't, as you've pointed out in one of your most recent videos, it doesn't fit the narrative that they're trying to construct. This idea that Islam is a benign and benevolent force. And yet we see a pattern of behavior from Nigeria to Afghanistan to Pakistan to the Philippines and Indonesia of bigotry and discrimination against religious minorities, that when it really takes deep root, it ends up with an actual campaign of genocide against, in Nigeria's case, the Christians. And I think that, one of the things that we need to do better as YouTube apologists for the church is to call out and to challenge the progressives on this double standard, this narrative double standard. So, for example, Christians are persecuted in Pakistan. There's a genocide being committed by jihadis against Christians in Nigeria. Never makes the news. The Chinese state carries out a kind of ethnic cleansing against Uyghur Muslims, and the BBC report it. The Karen Christians in Burma have suffered at the hands of the Burmese state. Never makes the news. The Burmese Muslims suffer at the hands of the Burmese state. Suddenly it's top of the news agenda. And I think that Christians as a whole are culpable for not being more vocal for the persecuted church, and that's why it's not a bigger deal. But I also think that apologists like me and you, and those that want to do as we do, need to be much more forceful in calling out the BBC, CNN on its hypocrisy, on its double standards, and really throwing it back in their face in a very, clear and polemically harsh manner.
You're absolutely correct. Since they aren't doing it of their own volition, you kind of have to shame them into doing it. It was the exact same thing with the grooming gangs, right? I mean, no one wanted to touch that until there was such an uproar over it from other people pointing it out that they were basically forced to reluctantly cover it. But you kind of have to do that with all issues. Like Raymond Ibrahim was interesting. So that church attack in Nigeria was, let me get the actual date here. So the church attack was that the 5th? I think that was the 5th. That was a Sunday. So June 5th. was the attack in Nigeria. But just a few days before that, on May 30th, Raymond Ibrahim posted an article, May 30th, on the Middle East Forum, said, for the United Nations, a single mosque attack outweighs countless church massacres.
Yeah.
And then he pointed out the United Nations declaring March 15th an International Day to Combat Islamophobia. And it's because on March 15th, 2019, that nutjob went and attacked mosques in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And so then what he does, and what Raymond Ibrahim does, is he lists attacks on churches over the past few years in Sri Lanka, Nigeria, Pakistan, Iraq, a bunch in Nigeria, a bunch in Egypt, Indonesia, the Philippines, Germany, even Russia, France. He lists these church attacks. And it's like, wait a minute, you have endless church attacks in the name of Allah, and not a peep. The UN doesn't care. There's certainly no international day for concern about persecution of Christians or something like that. And yet you have a mosque attack, and that's like, hey, we all need to gather around. But so just to be clear, everyone, it's no one. I've never met anyone who's saying that mosque attacks are okay or something like that. It's okay. How do you recognize how bad that is and want to do something about it? But you have these endless attacks carried out in the name of Allah against churches, and no one wants to even discuss why this is happening, let alone make commemorative days to deal with it.
And if there is some progressive genius out there that wants to square that particular circle for us and explain to us why the genocide against Nigerian Christians is not as important as vandalizing a mosque or burning a mosque down one in the West, how you seem to weigh these two things up as if they're not the same, and that the one event outweighs the countless events against Christians. I'd love for you to come on my channel and please explain to us Christians why we should not talk about the persecuted church and not point this out to you. I think, though, that as Christians, we need more of an education about how politics works, because we're constantly being outsmarted. Like, the first thing that the church, the whole body of Christ, needs to recognize, I would argue, and feel free to push back if you disagree, is that there's no state on our side. There's no country, there's no nation state that's out to back the church. But there are multiple nation states, not even the Vatican, I would say, but there are multiple nation states that are out to back the cause of Islam, which is why you have a terrorist and evil attack against mosques in New Zealand, and immediately it's calling for clamping down on Islamophobia. You have ethnic campaigns to wipe out Christians whole and entire, as happened in Sudan, South Sudan, has happened in northern Nigeria, has happened in Syria. That's three places where the Islamic world have tried to wipe out the entire population of Christians, as they have done in northern Cyprus, where they pushed out all the Christians from northern Cyprus, as they have tried to do in southern Serbia, in the province called Kosovo. You've got all of these examples, and yet there's no push from the UN to defend Christians. And that's because the Serbian state or the Cypriot state or the South Sudanese state, they define the struggle not in terms of Christianity versus Islam, but as some national thing, when really they should be drawing out the religious animosity that's driven this attack and start talking about Christophobia and start talking about the kind of bigotry that's emanating out of Islam and Islamic teachings.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. And like, I think, I mean, this is a conversation, so come back to me on anything you like. I think, another thing that we need to do as Christians is remember history. For 1400 years, and people don't think about this, but for 1400 years, every single year, Muslim armies marched into Europe, crying out Allahu Akbar, trying to conquer Europe. The last time they did it was in 1918. How have we forgotten that?
Mm-hmm.
How have we forgotten our own history? And I think we need to recover a strong sense of the history of the church and the history of the Christian people and our 1400-year struggle with Islam as a way of galvanizing and reviving the church.
Yeah, I tell people that about Robert Spencer's book, The History of Jihad, because, I've been debating issues related to jihad for a long time. And I read The History of Jihad, and it had the vast majority of that was information I didn't know. Because when we study jihad, I tend to go to the time of Muhammad, maybe the time of his immediate successors, maybe a little something having to do with the Crusades, later, and then modern times with groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda and so on. And we just kind of miss overwhelmingly everything that happened in between. When if you actually read it, you realize it's been completely relentless in its attacks on the West. Islam has never. The only time Islam stops is when it's stopped by an army that stops it, and that's when Islam stops advancing. And then it just becomes a plot on how to prepare for the next invasion and how to go about that. But it's been 14 centuries, and what you were just saying is even an issue that certain atheists have become aware of. So a while back, Richard Dawkins, who was, for years being the cheerleader for the decline of Christianity in Europe, he said in an interview, he said, I now have mixed feelings about the decline of Christianity in Europe because I think it may have been a bulwark against something worse. And so this is an atheist sort of realizing, wait a minute, we're going after Christianity here, and maybe Christianity was protecting us from something worse. Because think about it, right? Say whatever you want about Christians and stupid things that Christians fought over at times and so on. For 14 centuries, Christians in Europe said, hey, guys, whatever else we disagree on, however much we're going to fight, however much we're going to disagree, or what problems we're going to have, we are not going to be controlled by that, because we understand you generally do not come back from that. So whatever else happens, can we all agree? Can we all be on the same page? We're not going to be controlled by that. And as soon as you get people, who are turning away from Christianity, it's like you can't hand over your civilization fast enough, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. I think building alliances with people of goodwill. So that for those that don't know the term, people of goodwill are those that are on the side of the church, even though they're not Christians. So when you see an academic or someone essentially say Christianity is a great thing, we're poorer and worse off without it, even though they're not a Christian, that's a person of goodwill. So Jordan Peterson, doing all those Bible studies. I don't know if he's still in that phase of his life. I know that the Dawagandists are really targeting him at the moment. They've really got their eyes set on him. But we need to do better at building alliances with other academics in the world who recognize the good of the church and the good of the Christian faith and its impact on Western civilization.
Just a little side note on what you just said right there about, targeting Jordan Peterson. That ties into what I was saying earlier about, arguments that have been massively discredited. They've been massively discredited to where people aren't going to bring them up, to someone like you or something like that. So, Muhammad and Song of Solomon and things like that, or the perfect preservation of the Quran, where the Dawagandists understand this stuff isn't going to work anymore against anyone who knows what they're talking about. So I pointed out that people are then expanding onto like TikTok and so on, trying to get a new audience who isn't familiar with the refutations. And so they can go out and use arguments that they know have been completely debunked. But you hope if you can get them out to enough people rapidly enough that you're still going to win converts. And so it's like the mission of the Dawagandists is, can I deceive people faster than other people can go in and can swoop in and tell the truth? But that's part of the Dawa strategy for this year. It started last year, but it was, hey, can we get our fans to sort of harass people into letting us onto their platform? So, Jordan and Michaela Peterson, and they're constantly trying to get on like Joe Rogan and one of those Paul I forget, Logan Paul or Jake Paul or something like that. One of those Paul brothers has some sort of podcast, but they're trying to get on all of the big podcasts. But it's the exact same idea. It's, hey, this person will have a ton of followers who don't know the refutations of our arguments, and we can get access to a bunch of people who aren't going to know that we're spouting complete nonsense and just making stuff up. And how do we get access to those people? But notice it's the same mentality. It ties in with what you said about it being just normal to be manipulative and deceptive in presenting your information. And it's just, hey, let's use these same arguments that we know are bad. We know that they're based on false premises. We know that these are completely bogus arguments that anyone with knowledge of them can expose, but we have nothing else to rely on. So let's keep pushing these and just trying to get them out faster so that they can deceive more people, so that more people can convert, because we don't need to actually win this argument at the end of the day. We just need to establish a society where you're not allowed to question the argument.
The 99-1 rule.
Yeah.
It's working on the 99-1 rule. And this is a point that I can't stress enough to Christians. Like, me and David can win every argument in the world, but if they end up controlling the courts and the parliaments and the judges, we lose. That's it. It's game over. That's checkmate. So you need to be politically active. You need to understand the political and socioeconomic dimensions to this struggle that we're in. And I think that, like, Christians need Christians, all of you that are watching this, all of our brothers and sisters, particularly if you can articulate, get onto social media. Even if all you do is you learn how to refute one argument, and then you just go and you keep refuting that one argument wherever you find it. You don't need to learn the whole panorama of apologetics. Just learn one argument and then just go consistently knocking down that argument wherever it shows its ugly head, and develop that you become the expert in that particular question. And I think, like, get on social media, start telling your story as Christians, because the thing is, if you don't tell your story, your history, other people will tell your story for you. Other people will tell your history for you. And if you don't tell your beliefs, other people will say it for you. So if you're articulate and knowledgeable, please, like, get involved in this struggle. Start saying, linking with David, so to expand his curriculum, translating his videos, repeating his videos, and I think it's also about being strategizing. And I wanted to ask you this, considering your status as a YouTuber, like, we've seen the Dawagandists now, they target celebrities. They're very deliberately targeting celebrities, which is a strategy that they've borrowed from what Dawagandists were doing in the sporting world when they used to target boxers. And Christians, again, because we're politically naive, have been completely caught off guard by this. But why haven't you yet done your own interview with Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan or some other kind of celebrity and sort of cashed in a little bit on your, what is it, quarter of a million YouTube followers?
What? Did you say 250,000?
I don't mean to insult you at all. How many is it? What, 500,000?
Like six, I don't know. Anyone know? 670,
it's
680.
A lot.
Yeah, 600.
But the point is, you're a YouTube giant. Mm-hmm. Why haven't you started targeting the celebrities?
Well, the way they go about it is they're organized as far as things like that, right? Because each one has its group of followers. So there will be a message out, hey, everyone go contact Jordan Peterson and tell him that since he said this about Islam back in the past, to be fair, he has to have our guy on to represent Islam. Now, I have to say, I actually love it. I love that they're doing that. I don't love it that they're actually going to deceive a few people, but for someone who 15 years ago was sitting there thinking, how do we replace the Shabir Alis and the Jamal Badawis and so on with people who actually reflect the spirit of Islam much better? I'm loving it. My goodness, every podcast out there, please get Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa on there. Get them on there. Just let them talk. Let them keep talking all day long. Yes, they're going to convince some gullible people for at least a time that they're on the right side and so on. But overall, the bigger picture is that if you can get people to see what Islam really is, and their representatives are no longer these handcrafted, carefully selected people to misrepresent Islam to you, and you actually get people, we're proud of the death penalty for apostasy, and of course we're going to defend Muhammad's relationship with Aisha, and Hijab even saying that the Quran, if you don't go to the Hadith, the Quran promotes sex with, he said, extreme pedophilia. Yeah. He said a severe form of pedophilia if you just stick with the Quran. You have to go outside the Quran to find out that there's sort of anything that you should be waiting. Yeah, anything you should be waiting for. So these are the people. I mean, my goodness, you've got to. It's great that you have these people on people's.
When Hijab, when he crouches, or Golden Shower Boy, as I like to call him, when he decides to stick his foot in it, he really does stick his foot in it. You know, he doesn't go half-hearted, does he? You know, but I think that you know, like, this is a call and to Christians who are supporting YouTube apologists to get organized, and it's a call to YouTube apologists themselves to up their game, because the thing is that, you know, like, going after the celebrities, that's a clever strategy, you know, and in this game of chess that we're constantly playing, I often feel that our side is behind the curve. You know, we're a bit behind the curve. We're winning the intellectual argument, but because we're not strategizing at a sociological and a cultural level, we're just going straight for the intellectual all the time. You know, I feel we're often being outmaneuvered. And I think that we need to up our game in the way that we coordinate with one another, in the way that we back one another up, in the way that we support one another, and in the way that we start targeting these icons of culture, you know, for good or for bad, whatever we might think of them, but they're still icons of culture. How we target these icons of culture, because if, for instance, God forbid, one of these big names is completely duped and becomes Muslim, not only will he be paraded massively, but he'll drag a long of other very innocent people along with him, or her with them. And so we need to up our game as Christians. And I was just wondering, you know, whether you saw yourself as part of that, or whether you just think, no, I've got what I'm doing, I'm going to stick to it, or.
Yeah, I agree with upping our game and so on. I'm just, I'm not the sort of, I don't know what to call it, because, you know, at the end of the day, you do want to get on people's platforms and stuff, but I'm not the kind of, hey, have me on, guys, have me on. I want to be on your show type guy. And I don't think I'm the best. I don't think I'm the best representative. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, I will take a bite out of the Quran to keep someone from crossing lines and so on. So I'm not.
Yeah, that boat has sailed for you. Respectability in sort of like popular culture,
and that's just the price that I was willing to pay. It was okay. Someone has to do with this. Someone has to do the rough stuff. I'll go ahead and do that. And you're making a sacrifice here, but someone's got to do this stuff. So so other people can. Someone else will have to be the.
I hope someone's listening. I hope someone who is, you know, I hope you guys are listening, that we need to start going after these celebrities, going up to the Joe Rogans, saying, you said this about Christianity, now have Vocab Malone on. You know, going up to, you know, the Jordan Petersons and saying, you said this about Christianity, now have, I don't know, such and such a person on. Like, I can't think of someone off the top of my head who would go up with Jordan Peterson. But do you know what I'm saying? It's kind of like we've got to play this game of chess for what it is, and it is really a game of chess. And the thing is, it's all on a clock. It's all on a clock. It's on a demographic clock, and the clock is ticking, guys. And we, because of the failure of, you know, Western progressive culture in creating families and in structuring and building society around families, this very much is a ticking bomb, because you've got a demographic collapse of non-Muslim populations, and then you've got an explosion of the Muslim population. Now, I don't want to sort of fearmonger, because you look at the Amish, they're growing disproportionately more than your average American. You look at the Bruderhof, that's another Christian group that are growing more than the average American population. You look at Polish Catholic women in the UK, and they're having more children than your average English woman. But the point is, so I'm saying that to show that if you have traditional values and traditional sort of cultures that are very much centered around the family, it doesn't have to go down this road. But one of the groups that is bulging to fill the vacuum being created by the demographic collapse is the Islamic community, you know, and that will have consequences for us all. If it doesn't have to, but if history pans out in that direction, that will have consequences for everybody.
Yeah, and it's interesting that that issue actually ties in together with some of the stuff we were talking about before, in that with the demographics. So just going back to the same poll, the same Pew Research study that Muslims point to when they claim that Islam is the world's fastest growing religion. They make an argument out of it. You see, Islam is the world's fastest growing religion. It must be true. That Pew Research study that they point to, which said that, it also says the reason for the expansion of Islam is primarily high birth rates.
Yes.
So it's high birth rates. And they pointed this out. Anywhere you have any sort of significant Muslim population, their birth rates outnumber everyone else's birth rates. So you go to the Middle East, you go to Europe, wherever, Muslims have the highest birth rates. And we know why this is, because of Islam's impact on women. If women and girls don't have a lot of opportunities in life, or they don't have as much schooling, or they don't have as many career opportunities and so on, the tendency is to marry them off younger, and they start having children in their teens instead of, in their mid-20s or something like that. And your numbers go through the roof. But so you have that kind of issue. And so it's just straight mathematics right then. If you say, okay, this group is smaller, but they have the highest birth rates in the world, okay, then it's a matter of time. It might be 50 years, it might be 200 years, but if that continues, then it's only a matter of time. It's just straightforward mathematics. So where they will eventually outnumber you. So the question is, what's going to change? But what's interesting is they understand that it's a demographics issue too, and that's why there's this push to use arguments that they know are completely ridiculous and bogus. I mean, when Yasser Qadhi was for a popular Islamic apologetics channel talking about the Quran, there was no difference in any manuscript from the time of Uthman to the present. When he's giving a lecture to what he calls students of knowledge, people who are, actually studying the sources and so on, it was, of course, there are different Qurans used in different parts of the world with different texts and so on. And so completely different messages. So that's a guy who knew that he was lying. I mean, he knew it, right? And so these guys, if they're defending if they've read the Muslim sources and they're talking about the perfect preservation of the Quran, or Muhammad didn't have sex with Aisha or something like that, if they're saying any of that, they know they're lying. They know they're lying, or they're just massive source rejectors, right? Like Quran only or something like that. But the point is, they're using arguments that they know have been destroyed in an effort to. You're just basically trying to slow down the avalanche so that the demographics can eventually take over. Because once you actually have the majority of the population, you don't have to deal with the argument anymore. It's, hey, hey, here's my argument for Muhammad being the greatest man of all time. I dare you to say one word in response. I dare you, because we're just going to beat you to death right here in the streets.
And we in microcosm we experience that kind of harassment at the corner. Because it's right next to Edgware Road, and Edgware Road is mainly a sort of Muslim enclave of London, and so they dominate, just by geography, they dominate Speaker's Corner because it's literally like 2 minutes away from everybody's house. It's all in walking distance. And all the minorities at Speaker's Corner, whether they're Shia, Christian, Jewish, atheist, have all suffered harassment at the hands of the majority Sunni Muslim group at some level or to some degree, and it's kind of like, if you want to push back on the demographics thing, you support education for women in the Islamic world. Like, that is the best thing you can do, is to support the education of women and the protection of women's rights in the Islamic community, to ensure that they're not married off young, that they're not taken out of your local school, which did happen. I went to a school where that happened. There were girls that just 1 year didn't come back. And then, it turns out that they've been taken back to Bangladesh in this case and married off at a young age. And that's the thing that happens in the UK. And again, the state is willing to turn a blind eye to it. But I think that that kind of brings us on to political language, because again, this thing that I've mentioned a couple of times, the political naivety of the church, is also our lack of nuance in our language of discourse about this topic. And even now in our discourse, me and you have kind of fallen into that a little bit. When we talk about, when we say them, or when we talk about Muslims, what we're picturing in our mind are the Dawagandists, the Da'i, the Jihadi, the Islamist. We're not, me and you aren't thinking all Muslims, but I think often our side has a lack of nuance in their language of discourse about this topic, which makes it very easy for us to be cornered or labeled or framed as if we've got some kind of racial or religious prejudice. When actually, I don't know, I'm speaking for myself here. I actually really love Muslims. That's why I direct my evangelism towards them. I love Arab culture. I think it's beautiful, and I'm guessing it's the same for you. But we often, I think, particularly in discourse amongst groups of Christians on this topic, we have clumsy language that we need to be aware of.
Yeah, and part of the the thinking that it's a racial issue is that just goes back to people effectively weaponizing any criticism. Because think about it. My best friend all through college was a Pakistani American Muslim. Right? It's like, am I racist against that group? It's because my what I criticized my best friend's ideas that he was trying to convince me of, and then after that, after he becomes a Christian, then it's okay, now you guys are threatening to kill him. Hey, you're not going to mess with my Pakistani American Christian convert friend here, so I'll go after your ideology too. And then it's, aha, you're criticizing Islam. You're criticizing the death penalty for apostasy for your best friend. It must be because of race, right? It's just a quick, that's just become a way to criticize
the go-to
any
shield.
position. Yeah. If you don't want to answer the argument, you just go with that sort of irrelevant ad hominem. And so it's something to watch out for, and something you have to deal with. But sad that that's just the culture we've come to. You can be arguing, hey guys, marrying 9-year-old girls is bad. Only a racist would say that. It's like, what? Are you stupid?
Yeah.
What in the world? What in the world?
Yeah,
no, it's exactly. It's bad for any race, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing to do with race.
Yeah. No, and I think that's the thing, is we've got to learn to use our categories better, and to say, look, we know that there's cultural Muslims, and we know that there's liberal Muslims, and we know that there's traditional Muslims and conservative Muslims, and we know that there's radical Muslims and jihadi Muslims. And it's actually this kind of percentage down here in this corner that we've got the biggest problem with. The rest we can get along with, we can live in peace with, but this particular group, this particular percentage that support jihad, that wish to impose Sharia law, those are the ones that we're standing against. And there's nothing wrong with that. If we were to criticize Hinduism or communism or Nazism or fascism, no one would accuse us of having a phobia. It's only Islam that has achieved this phobia status. You can make a criticism of rabbinic Judaism, or you can make a criticism of Sikhism, and no one would accuse you of a prejudice. But if you criticize Islam, you're accused of having this prejudice. And we've got to call out that failure in thinking that's dominating our culture, and it's just being used to weaponize and shut us down.
Yeah, and part of it would just, I mean, if people have facts that are handy, very easy. If you're criticizing something to do with Muhammad and someone, that's racist. Say what part of saying, are you a racist? No, I'm not a racist. Okay, so do you think it's okay to have sex with a 9-year-old girl? Because you're saying it's a race issue. Do you believe apostates should be killed? No, I don't believe apostates should be. Okay, you're saying the exact same thing I just said, and you accuse me of racism over it. So as long as you have the information handy, and one thing that's helpful as well, because you pointed out that even Muslim minorities are in danger from whatever the larger group has to be. You can tell people, guys, we're trying to protect.
It's the Sunni that suffer. If it's the Sunni, the Shia suffer. It's kind of like,
you could point out, guys, we're trying to protect Muslims from being killed as well. And matter of fact, if we're pointing out that there's jihad against Shias, if there's jihad against Ahmadis and so on from these various sects, if we're trying to protect them, if we're trying to protect these Muslims by criticizing the ideology that calls for their violent subjugation as well, because in Surah 973 of the Quran, Muhammad was told that he doesn't just fight the unbelievers, he also fights the hypocrites, the people who are claiming to be Muslims but aren't following it in truth. And so if we're trying to protect them and you're harassing us, it's like you're trying to get them killed.
Yeah.
So you guys are trying to get. Do you want this endless bloodshed against Muslims from other Muslim groups to dominate? Because we don't.
Yeah.
And so you can always flip that stuff back on people.
And it's exactly. It's about taking our polemical and apologetical arguments that we use successfully against the Quran, but then applying them to the wider political discourse about Islam and about Christianity. In the Western world, like, we've got to contend for the narrative and how the whole debate is framed. Like, one of the things that people ask me is like, how do you get so good? How do you get so good? If you watch my debates, and I'm not claiming to be good, by the way, that's just what other people say about me. But like, if you watch my debates at the corner, I don't just deal with the argument, but I also am constantly framing the debate. I'm always framing the debate at the same time as dealing with the arguments. And that's something that we Christians have to get better at, is framing the debate. How do we frame it? So are we talking, for instance, looking at the modern rise of the jihadi movement from the Muslim Brotherhood that grew out of the Muslim Brotherhood? Are we going to frame that as something that's just happened in recent times? Or are we going to frame it in the fact that there was not not 1 year for the last 1400 years in which Muslim armies didn't try to conquer Christian land? Like, how do you frame it? How do you frame the discussion? And that's something I think as Christians we need to get much better at. So, like, we've got 30 minutes left. And I know we put in our back pocket this idea that you could make a quick presentation, but I'm just wondering, have I given you enough time to make a quick presentation? Or
it doesn't have to be a presentation; it could be a discussion, or we could do this on my channel. We could do this on my channel a different day. Up to you. But
okay, let's do it. Let's do it on your channel, like, because I think we're very bad at arranging stuff and then just talking and then forgetting what we planned to do. Like, I originally came on your channel, I was going to go through the Dawah script, and then we never did. We got talking. And like, I asked you to prepare a sort of presentation on 3 reasons why a Muslim should leave Islam and 3 reasons why you should become Christian. And we've got talking again, and now we've not really given it enough time.
Yeah, what we could do if we want to do something on my channel is like you give your 3 reasons, I'll give my 3 reasons, and some of them, of course, might match, and so we'll just be, we'll be in agreement on those. But we can kind of discuss back and forth. Okay, your top reason why someone should leave Islam, what is it? And then I go with mine. We could do, you know what I mean?
Yeah, we should definitely do that. We should definitely do that. Before we go on to that, I know you've got another message that you need to encourage people to subscribe to a certain channel. So I'm going to step out of the room for a minute while you do another important public announcement.
Ladies and gentlemen, you may have noticed that there's a problem in the world. There's a problem, multiple problems, actually. You have complete deception that is convincing people that a certain ideology is true. You have the threat of apostasy laws over people who are trying to leave this ideology, that they'll be killed. At the very least, they'll have to give up their families because their families will shun them if they don't try to kill them. And these people are being told all their lives that the worst possible sin that they can commit is saying that Jesus is Lord. They call that the sin of shirk. So there's this big problem here, not to mention that ideology calls for the violent subjugation of the entire world. A big problem. What do you do when you have a problem? You fix it. And so if you want something fixed, you know where to go. Bob the Builder. Be sure to subscribe.
That was brilliant. That was brilliant. I'll send you a bigger check in the post. Thank you very much. That was brilliant. That was really good.
Hey,
maybe
I'll put together a legitimate ad for your channel at some point. That'd be funnier.
Yeah, that feel free. I don't know. I would look forward to that. That would be quite amusing. It'd be nice maybe one day for us to get together. Like, I mean, whether you're on YouTube or not, to have you back and Apostate Prophet, because I had Apostate Prophet on my channel recently. Did you get a chance to watch that conversation?
No, I didn't know you guys had a discussion.
Yeah,
I mean, someone probably told me, and I probably immediately, I forget like 98% of everything I hear every day nowadays. It's like
You mean he didn't contact you immediately, going, "I've just spoke to Bob. He's changed my life." He didn't.
He probably did, and I probably forgot about it. Like, and no, I'm usually focused on something, and stuff keeps coming in, and then it just, I don't know, like it bounces right off my mind. Like I have this recurring issue where I'll come up with some hilarious idea during a live stream. Someone will say something. I'll go, "Oh, you know what we should do? We should do a video that's a game show, blah, 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 blah." And then right after the show, someone's like, "Oh, are you really going to do that? Because that's such a great idea." And I'll be like, what are you talking about? It's like an idea that I just came up with 30 minutes earlier, and I have no clue what the person is talking about. And so I don't know. It's I don't know if it's getting old, or if my brain is like a orange juice glass that's already mostly full. And if you try to pour more in, stuff's going over the edges, and then just
do you find that you're constantly having to study? Because I find that I'm always having to, every week, I'm always studying for what might come up next week, or like I'm constantly trying to absorb information. It feels like a perpetual intellectual arms race. Like, I mean, maybe you've been in the game so long, it's just like you're used to it. But do you find that you're constantly having to keep yourself refreshed with arguments, ideas, events, so that you're able to speak?
Yeah, I've started like reading again last year. I mainly started reading again. And it was primarily because I found out I couldn't read anymore. I'd spent so many years doing like social media that I realized, okay, now I used to spend like 4 to 6 hours a day reading every day. And now I haven't read a book in a couple years, as far as just sitting down and reading a book. So I was like, okay, I need to get to reading again. And then I'm sitting there reading the same paragraph over and over again. I can't focus. And then I was like, well, what's causing this? And I actually looked it up on how being on social media all the time, being on the internet all the time is actually changing pathways in your brain to make it more difficult to focus on anything that you have to just have sustained attention on. It actually programs you to be constantly distracted. There have been tons of studies and so on verifying the impact that the internet is having on people's brains. So I had to like force myself to like detox from everything. And so I spent months without going on social media stuff, except for like very important specific stuff, and just reading the entire time. But found that it did make me much more calm. But yeah, it's again, I don't know if it's age or I don't know if it's social media and so on, but I don't feel like I put information together nearly as well as I did like 20 years ago. Much slower in responding to things. Like you were mentioning debates and so on. Like I don't think I'm a terribly good debater. I don't know, maybe I feel like I'm average or something like that. And I'm not saying that to be humble. When it comes to making videos where I thoroughly prepare everything I'm going to say, and I say it exactly the way I want it, and I say it again, and I'll record something multiple times until I say it until I get it right. I pick myself over anyone. I'm not saying that I'm the best at that either, but I do it exactly the way I want it. I like the way I do it. So I think I'm really, really good at that. But I mean, nowadays, especially like the last 10 years, anytime someone's bringing up an objection, so they bring up an objection, here's my objection to this, or here's my defense of Muhammad. My natural inclination now is to like stop and think. And okay, so what would the response to that be? Would this be accurate? What would some responses to that be? Is this really a good objection? And I want to keep pausing. Whereas like in the heat of an argument, you just have to just be sort of belting stuff back and come what may. But I've been sort of deprogrammed out of that because I focused on YouTube videos and so on, where I can take all the time in the world to think through my point.
A year at Speaker's Corner would whip you back into shape.
I've heard that. But yeah, so it's just a situation where the way I've been doing things, slows down your thinking. So I like doing this, but it is. I don't know. I don't know if it's getting older.
Well, I was just on that. I would, I'm putting this out there. I'm just putting this out there. I've got a couple of points to put out there for you. One, I would love to host a debate between you and Apostate Prophet on any topic that you two agree. Come onto my channel, and I'll be the guy in the middle. And because at one time you were going to have a debate with him, weren't you, about whether God exists? And I don't know if it actually happened. Did it happen?
We started it, but I was in a horrible position to be making sustained YouTube videos. I was still in that stay away from social media phase. And so I was like, okay, let me go ahead and start this thing off. And then just never got back to it. We are going to continue this. So I told him like a month ago, hey, let's go ahead and finish this up. But then I was like, wait, I'm nuking my channel and I'm starting over. So that could actually, I would rather do that after I nuke my channel and I start something else. But yeah, we are going to finish that. That was a way I'm actually interested in, where I post my opening statement online and then he posts his opening statement, and then I post my rebuttal and then he posts. So we get to do it as YouTubers, not as like, firing back and forth in the heat of the moment. But yeah, once we get that up, we could always have a more traditional debate where it is off, it is
also, I know, because I told you that I run a meeting for Christian YouTube apologists once a month. I keep sending you the invite on Skype and you keep missing it. But there's a guy who comes to that called Thaddeus. I don't know if you know his YouTube channel.
Has he been doing it for a while? Because there used to be a Thaddeus on like Blogger and stuff.
I don't know. But anyway, I know that he wants to, basically, he thinks that Muslims do such a terrible job at defending Islam that he wants to have an argument with you. I forget which topic it was, whether it was about the age of Aisha or whether about, Quran's not being changed. I think it was about the age of Aisha.
Wait, is that the guy from Reasoned Answers or something?
Yeah. He
Okay,
wants
I know his
a
YouTube
mock
channel
debate with you where he feels he could actually make a better case than Muslims do in favor of some of these positions. And like I was just wondering if you were interested. I'm just putting that out there. Like whether you want to take up the gauntlet, because he did a video where he threw down the challenge at you, and I don't think you've ever seen it, or if you did, you just decided, right, I'm not. He's a pipsqueak of a YouTuber. I'm not replying to him. Like what? Like
no, I see the concern is if you do a mock debate, then someone's going to jump in there. You see, he's scared of actual debaters, so he has to have people pretend. That is the concern. With that said, I mean, I've done stuff like that, kind of like that before. Like Robert Spencer and I did a debate versus Anjem Chowdhury and Sheikh Omar Bakri on whether Muhammad existed, and so we were taking the negative position, and so I was saying, hey, I believe that Muhammad existed, but I don't believe you guys can defend it with your methodology. And so I took the negative position, arguing that Muhammad didn't exist, using their arguments. You can't defend the existence of Muhammad. And then at a different time, I debated Robert Spencer on whether Muhammad did exist. And I said, hey, I can make a better case than these guys can using the methods that they use. I can make a better argument. Even then it was still rough. It's rough when you don't have any early sources to go on. You have to come up with different arguments. So it is very difficult actually to argue for the existence of Muhammad without early sources. But it was a similar idea of, I have debated positions I didn't agree with in order to, make a point about, how to do it more effectively and so on. So yeah, it's I've already told him I'll do something with him. I don't know if it's that.
Right. You've been in touch with him. Okay. Yeah. I know that he wanted to have that kind of. He did a YouTube video about it. I don't know if you'd ever seen it, so I just wanted to sort of bring it to your attention. You've said that before you go, and this is the reason why you've come on my channel. You want to sort of elevate other Christian YouTubers. Are there any in mind that you've got lined up coming forward that you want to advertise now, or other Christian YouTubers you want to mention for your subscribers to become aware of as you leave, your channel disappears, where your folks should go to for their YouTube content, as it were?
Yeah, so definitely before I go, I want to promote the Speaker's Corner, Christian. So definitely you and Hatun and the whole everyone who goes out there, their channels. Some general Christian apologists, some newer people like God Logic and so on. I have to go check out some of the videos, but I'm just seeing certain names keep coming up, and that's a good sign when a bunch of people are saying, hey, here's the channel that needs to be promoted. So, but yeah,
was God Logic the one that busted Fibin Farouk?
Yeah. So yeah, I hadn't heard about him. But yeah, he's seems sharp and seems good at what he does. So and basically that's kind of the people I'm looking for, because when I say, hey, who should I promote? People are saying the apostate prophet, and what do you mean? Like, they don't need it. They have hundreds of thousands of subscribers. I wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't be talking to them. I'm looking for people who are underrated, right? Like, hey, you're putting out great content, but not enough people know about you. So that's especially good because, my viewers are generally interested in the same kinds of subjects. So hear people who deal with the same kinds of claims, check out their channels, watch a few of their videos, and then see if you like them. Because a lot of it comes down to, I don't like this person's personality or something like that. Like, people want to view different kinds of people. So,
and I think there's got to be, amongst, because hopefully, like there's a lot of people who, I want to say that you personally inspire me, like, and the reason for that is that, like I got into this because of Jay Smith. It was Jay Smith that got me into like Speaker's Corner and polemics and apologetics, and he was someone that really I saw him as an inspirational character. And then through him, I discovered you. I discovered Sam Shamoon, and there was another gentleman that used to work with you on a particular program, but I forget what the other gentleman's name was.
There's Pastor Joseph.
Yes, that's him. And like, but one of the things that I've always found encouraging is that you do all of this, and yet you're dealing with real life problems. You're dealing with real life issues. You're dealing with real life. It's kind of like you don't come from a perfect family background. It's not that everything's, roses and butterflies and Tweety birds in your life story. You're having to go through real stuff. Like, and yet you're living that life, and yet you're still here, present, fighting the good fight. And that for me is exemplary, because what it says to me is that, you don't have to come from some nice ivory tower, middle class background, where a perfect family, to get involved in this kind of thing. And, and that has genuinely, I'm saying this meaningfully, like, that has genuinely encouraged me to keep going, because not everything in my own backstory is perfect. Not everything in my own family history is perfect. And sometimes you do wonder whether it kind of, am I the right person to be doing this? And so I just thought it would be worth sharing that little personal testimony towards you. And don't underestimate how many people you've inspired over the years that you've done this work.
Well, one of the things that I think everyone is, something that I learned, and I think other people should learn, is, whatever defects you may have, like if you're messed up in certain ways, how can that actually be useful in certain contexts? Or, and then in addition to that, it's, if you believe that stuff happens for a reason, or that you can, things that happen are actually steering you in a certain direction, and maybe you're the right person for certain things. So, I got out of prison, and then I ended up sharing a hotel room with Nabil Qureshi. And then it's, when people are telling me, when there were even Christians telling me, dude, you're wasting your time. You've been talking to this guy for 3 years now. What are you doing? You could have been talking to so many other people for so long. You're still talking to the same guy, arguing with him all the time. Why can't you recognize that his heart is just hard? And at the bottom of it is, I don't believe we ended up sharing that hotel room by coincidence. I don't believe I met this guy by coincidence. As long as if we're having these arguments and he keeps coming back, I believe this is all part of some plan. And so you would have to saw my head off to get me to stop talking to this guy. And so you have situations like that, but in that situation, I have to think, okay. Lots of other Christians seem like they'd be inclined to give up on witnessing to someone that they've been witnessing to for years. Me, I come from such a messed up background that I'm just not counting anyone out. I'm not saying, oh, this guy's too far gone, because what the heck? I had to be all messed up in a cell before I started paying any attention to what was going on. And that was a process that took a long time. So who am I to say this guy's not coming along fast enough? So you have situations like that. And then you have even other situations like, so we have 2 sons who are on life support. We have 5 sons, but 2 of them are on life support. Well, one of the things I didn't want to do when I'm, planning out what I'm going to spend my life doing is, I didn't want to be spending a ton of time away from home. So that's something that lots of apologists did back in the day. You went around traveling the world. And so people would be gone 250 days out of the year traveling to go speak in various places. I'm like, I can't be leaving my wife home during this time. And so when I was thinking about, YouTube and social media, wow, this allows me to be at home with my wife while still getting information out to the world and so on. And so it's just situations like that where, I don't know, and it's sort of anything that might happen. It's, hey, what use can this make? What good can come out of this? So it doesn't make the situation good, but given the bad things that happen, how can those actually turn into a positive direction? And so it's always like a tornado could hit this house right now, and I would be thinking, all right, what's going to come out of this that's going to be cool, what's going to glorify God out of this?
Yeah, it goes back to virtue ethics, which is, the assumed ethical system of the New Testament. Like, whatever happens in your life, it's what virtue can grow out of that circumstance. But in you, I've seen it in real time over the years, and I'm just saying, it's an encouragement to me, and I hope it's an encouragement to other Christians to get in the fray, to get into the battle, to get into social media, to start doing apologetics, polemics. Even if all you do is you just, like, Nadia, you're just focusing on one argument and you go on that argument and you attack it wherever you find it, kind of thing. Because if enough of us do that, the entire Dawa script will be, dismantled by the collective whole, as opposed to a few specialists who.
And by the way, you can't overstate the importance of what you just said enough. That is in fact, everyone who's watching, if you take away anything from this live stream, there is this recurring problem, which I've noticed for many, many years. It's that Christians think, if I go and I try to deal with Islam, well, Muslims are just going to bombard me with all these issues, and I do not know how to deal with all these issues. Therefore, until I've studied it all, then I cannot engage. And when people are asking me how to get started, I normally tell them, hey, learn something well and get started. People ask me how to read the Quran. I say, you can, of course, if you're extremely dedicated, just read the Quran straight through. You're probably going to give up reading the Quran before you finish reading the Quran. It is that bad. So I would put that off for a couple of years or something like that. I encourage people to study issues topically. Pick a topic you're interested in. Learn what the Quran says about that topic and what the Hadith say about that topic. Become well versed in that topic, and go to that topic. And notice, you don't have to study everything if that becomes your topic. And of course, you can always learn another topic down the road. But yeah, I mean, just think, we're talking about how to make certain facts common knowledge, when you still run into Muslims who don't know about them. You still run into all kinds of Muslims who still don't. I mean, in spite of us bombarding them for years with, Muhammad and Aisha, you still run into Muslims who don't know anything about that. But notice, if every Christian who knows about that learned that one thing and actually, had a source and took a screenshot of the source in Sahih al-Bukhari or something like that, and every one Christian shared that with someone else, oh, great. You just doubled the number of people who know about that. If every one of them, then, I mean, you could get this information to the entire world very quickly. But that idea, you don't engage until you know everything there is to know about that. It's absolute disaster. Just be aware. Just be aware of the fact that if you go out there and you say, okay, I know this one issue. Yes, people are going to bring up all sorts of issues you don't know about. There's no shame in saying, hey, I'm new. I've never studied that before. Would you mind if I looked into that before responding? And you kind of learn on the go that way. But yes, it's very simple. I mean, if each Christian learned one thing, or some people learn like 3 things, and you just made sure that you kept sharing those things over and over again, or you just learned one response to one argument, and you just, every time you saw that argument used, you posted that response.
If the Holy Scriptures use the analogy that the church is like a body, if that analogy bears out, then the apologist is like the white blood cell. Like the apologist is the white blood cell, is to the church what the white blood cell is to the body. Our job is to fight infection. Our job is to get rid of mutating cells that are going off the rails. Our job is to make sure that the body is clean from lies, as it were. And those of us that are called to be apologists, you got to study. But I would also add to what you've said, David, by saying the importance of continuing to study your own faith, continue to study Christianity. It's not enough just to be fueled by an anger towards Islam. That's a very unhealthy way to approach this. You've got to be fueled by a love for Christ, and by wanting to know Christ more, and by wanting to know his holy church more, and by wanting to know his discipleship more and his tutelage more. And let that love inspire you to conquer Islam. Let that love inspire you to envision the day that we build a cathedral in Mecca. Let that, but be moved by love, and make sure you know your own faith more than you know any arguments against any other belief. So if you're going to spend an hour studying to argue against Islam, make sure you double that and study your own faith just as much.
And what's cool about that is that this ties into the issue of people thinking there are going to be all these arguments that I don't know how to deal with, and so I don't want to actually go out and engage. People don't seem to realize, guys, the arguments that you're going to encounter from Muslims, there's going to be like 5 to 7 arguments that you're just going to hear over and over again, like 99% of the time. Yes. It's going to be, your Bible's been corrupted. Yeah. The Trinity doesn't make sense. Where does Jesus say, I am God, worship me?
How did Jesus die on the cross?
Yeah. How can God die? And there'll be variations of that all have to do with, the Trinity and the incarnation. So to be, if Jesus is God, why did he pray? Yeah. If Jesus is God, how could he come out of a woman? Things like that. But notice those are all basically the same objection. Then it's, if Jesus died for your sins, doesn't that mean you can sin all you want? And so it's basically a handful of objections that come in different forms. But here's the thing. I mean, if you know ahead of time, hey, these 5 or 6 objections are what you're going to hear 99% of the time from Muslims. My goodness, how are not Christians preparing for this, right? I mean, if you were going out and there's going to be a football game, you said, hey, the opposing team is only going to run 5 different plays, and here's how you can tell which play is coming. How would you not prepare your defense for dealing with those 5 plays?
Yeah,
I don't know. So, but the cool part is, I mean, you're talking like a day, you're talking like a few hours of a day in training to deal with those main 5 or 6 objections effectively. Yeah. And you're good for 99% of the situations you'll ever be in. So how are we not preparing this stuff?
And just a quick key, guys, all the arguments against the Trinity that Muslims make are basically based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the incarnation. Bottom line is, Christ took to himself a humanity. And that's the bottom line. That will be the summary conclusion to all of their arguments about how could he pray, how could he die, how could he be born, how could he go to the toilet, how could he do this, how could he do that, and be God. It's because he took to himself a humanity, in one sentence. Now you have to work out and pad that out a bit more. You've got to go away and study it, but essentially that's the bottom line that you're going to. And the Dawah script is predictable. Once you've learnt the Dawah script, you just have them dancing around. It's not hard. And that's why, incidentally, and we'll be coming into land now, because we said we'd stop after 2 hours, but that's why London is the font of a Dawah-Gandhist initiative that I don't know how far it reaches, but I think it reaches across the English-speaking world. Britain is a net exporter of terrorism, sadly, because of the weakness of our government. But as Christians, this fountain of Dawah can be met with a fountain of evangelism into the Islamic world. Like, don't let fear hold you back. Like, be wise, be prudent, be intelligent in how you do things, but don't let fear hold you back. I often say it's a bit like the analogy of it's lions hunting hyenas. Like, one-on-one, a lion will win, but if a lion gets caught out and suckered by a pack of hyenas, the lion loses. We're hunting an ideology whose activists are hunting us. And you've got to be aware that it very much is a spiritual battle in which your opponent is as much trying to capture you as you're trying to capture them for Christ. So guard your soul, guard your heart, guard your mind, but don't operate from a place of fear, because that's how Islam manages to thrive in so much of our world, is because it's managed to make people scared of it.
And going along those lines, and actually tying it together with some earlier thoughts, I mentioned sort of seeing everything as far as, hey, what am I here for? Given who I am and my personality and this and that, what am I here for? What is my purpose from God right now? And you can do that as an entire church as well, because when I look at the situation, right? I look at the situation we're in, and based on demographics and birth rates, they're telling us, hey, it's inevitable. You're all about to be subjugated and oppressed and not be free to preach the gospel or criticize this ideology anymore, because it's going to shut you down. And then just a couple of decades before that happens, before we are scheduled to be subjugated, we get open access to the entire Muslim world through technology, through social media, through websites, to where, back in the day, if you wanted to go talk to Muslims in Saudi Arabia, yeah, you had a good chance of getting your head chopped off, because you're going to go to Saudi Arabia if you raised any sort of uproar or had any sort of success in establishing a church. Someone's coming to chop your head off. Now I can pick up my phone and start texting someone in Saudi Arabia if I want, or go on Facebook or start that while waiting for a bus or something, can sit there talking to people in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and so on. So I look at right now, what's going on right now. So all of a sudden, for 14 centuries, Muslim leaders have been able to keep their people insulated, right? They don't hear criticisms of Islam. They don't hear any presentation of a serious presentation of an alternative to Islam. So for 14 centuries, you have very little access to the Muslim world. Right now, all of a sudden, we get open access to everyone with an internet connection around the world. So right now, our time, we get open access to Muslims around the world through technology. But in addition to that, within our lifetimes, we've seen tons and tons of Muslims come to the West. And all of a sudden, now there are Muslims all around you. There are Muslims, you run into Muslims when you're going to the store, you run into Muslims at school, you have Muslim coworkers, you see Muslims all the time. So now those Muslims are no longer protected, in a land where you'll be killed for telling them the truth about their fake prophet. So now you have access to those Muslims who've immigrated to the West. And on top of all of that, it's the same exact time where we get open access to their sources, to all of their sources. So now we have the Quran, tons of translations. We have all their main hadith collections. We've got the Sirah. We've got we've got the major works of tafsir. We've got all of this just handed to us. So right now, right when they tell us, hey, guys, you're a few decades away from being subjugated forever, we get everything we need to refute the ideology at its core, to share the gospel with Muslims around the world, things that Christians couldn't have dreamed of for 14 centuries. I sit here and I look at this and I say, wow, the Almighty just delivered your ideology into our hands. The Almighty, the Almighty just said to Christians, here, you want to deal with this problem before you're subjugated? Here is everything that you need. And I have to say, I do not want to show up before the Almighty and say, oh yeah, well, I was too busy doing everything else. Or I was too worried about being called a name. I didn't want to be called an Islamophobe, so I just didn't deal with that.
Like, learn the example of the martyrs, guys. It's kind of like, like the early church were not afraid, and nor should we be. But I think, again, it's kind of like, we're talking in terms of individual effort. But remember, it's not just individual effort. It's organizing, it's supporting one another. Sorry, I'm gonna cough, bear with me. So it's organizing, it's supporting one another, it's standing in solidarity with one another. So you've got to unite take down your denominational differences, start working together, organize the necessary levels of mobilization to make the kind of impact that you want, train. Where in terms of apologetics, that means training in learning the arguments, but depending on how you take on the battle, because remember, it's political, it's social, it's economic, train, and then mobilize. Get involved in the fray. Yeah, don't just be a spectator, but get involved somehow appropriate to your context, conditions, circumstances, skills, and abilities, and then resist. Mm-hmm. In a word. So, David, I'm afraid, as you've probably spotted, I'm a bit ill. So,
that's a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, Jace, there's worse people to be mistaken for. David,
every conversation I get into, I bring up two things: the book and the man. We have to go back to the book and the man
every single time.
We got the book and the man
every single time. Yeah, all the time. That's quite a good impression. I'm sure it'll be happy. So, David, a final word to you then. What would you like to say to your audience? I mean, you've already told them to subscribe. I hope you're all paying attention to that bit. But as a final message to sort of anyone who may be inspired to get a bit more involved, particularly in terms of coming onto social media and in terms of doing apologetics and polemics on social media, what would be your sort of final message to those people?
Yeah, I mean, I understand there are situations where people have other things that they're trying to, cover, other groups that they're interested in, things they're trying to cover. So if you already have something that you're focused on, no problem. If you've got something that you like doing or you want to do or you think you're here for and so on, that's cool. Stick with that. If you're sort of wondering, what you should do, this is one area. The things we're talking about, that is one area where people could be very, very helpful. Again, do not assume that you need to learn everything ahead of time, or that you have to be the best debater in the world, or that you have to be the same as doing what Bob does or anything like that. Everyone can learn something. Think if you learned one fact, if you learned one important fact about Christianity, or you learned one important fact about Islam, and you just shared that one thing you learned about Christianity, or that one thing you learned about Islam, and if you had millions of Christians all doing that, that has a huge impact. So don't underestimate your ability to play a role in what goes on. If we're a body, right? It's not just the one thing you're doing. It's millions of people all doing something, and that's how you change the world.
Amen. Okay, I'm going to close this in a prayer. I'm going to read from Btbsoco, which is Psalm 32, for those that don't know the names. Blessed is he whose unrighteousness is forgiven, and whose sin is covered. Blessed is the man unto whom the Lord imputeth no sin, and in whose spirit there is no guile. For while I held my tongue, my bones consumed away through my daily complaining. For thy hand is heavy upon me day and night, and my moisture is like the drought in summer. I will acknowledge my sin unto thee, and mine unrighteousness have I not hid. I said, I will confess my sins unto the Lord, and so thou forgavest the wickedness of mine sin. For this shall every one that is godly make his prayer unto thee, in a time when thou mayest be found. But in the great water floods they shall not come nigh him. Thou art a place to hide me in, thou shalt preserve me from trouble. Thou shalt compass me about with songs of deliverance. I will inform thee and teach thee in the way wherein thou shalt go, and I will guide thee with mine eyes. Be ye not like a horse and mule, which have no understanding, whose mouths must be held with bit and bridle, lest they fall upon the way. Great plagues remain for the ungodly, but whoso putteth his trust in the Lord, mercy embraceth him on every side. Be glad, O ye righteous, and rejoice in the Lord, and be joyful, all ye that are true of heart. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. God bless you, David, and I hope your future project is met with nothing but the blessings of the Lord and every kind of success. And I look forward to coming on your channel with the person that I've nominated. I'm going to keep it a surprise.
Oh, nice.
I've got one guy coming to join us, and we'll arrange those dates, and I'll get on your channel before you delete it.
All right, sounds good.
All right.
But it's cool. It's cool because then you can download it.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. Right then. Good night, all. God bless everybody. Take care.